Good afternoon and welcome to episode 37 of Funny Like a Clown podcast, coming from you at we're in Winchendon, Massachusetts. This is September 22nd, 2019, and they call it Winchentucky, and it's the toy town. As you can see behind me, they got a big toy horse to commemorate that they got a lot of factories in town that build toys. Like, we came out of Gardner, and that was the Chair City. They had the big chair. Well, now we got the big toy horse behind us, and I think I already said it's episode 37, so we come a long way. We'll be discussing Jonathan Winters today, legendary comedian, and apparently everybody in Winchendon owns a motorcycle because it's about the 5th Harley that comes by. So if you move to Winchendon, Massachusetts, mandatory you buy a Harley Davidson, but hey, fine American bike, there's nothing wrong with that. Let's see. I'm getting around, you know. I mean, we normally, the studio's in Gardner, little town outside of Boston. I'm getting around. Winchendon's a little bit past Gardner, and I'm out sightseeing. I'm bringing you guys with me. Funny Like a Clown podcast, as always, is brought to you by G Vegas Buffalo Sauce for the spicy, sweet, savory taste of game time. There is only one G Vegas available at www.gvegas.webs.com. Check it out, man. I mean, it's a homemade recipe. It's local. You're supporting the local people, and it's tasty, I'll tell you. Much better than anything you can buy in a bottle at a store, okay? Anything homemade. You make homemade good stuff. You know, it's homemade Jonathan Winters, man. Homemade comedian. Let's see, he began in the 1960s, and he started recording comedy albums for Kavir Records, and he released a comedy album every decade for 50 years, which that's quite the accomplishment, because I think of Eddie Murphy, where you know, he did comedy albums and everybody loved him, but once he hit it in the big time in movies, he stopped doing the comedy albums. And you know, I thought, you know, that's your first love, and he always said that was a stepping stone, you know, stand-up comedy. He used that as a stepping stone to get to making movies, but there's nothing like a live crowd. There's nothing that gets your juices going, and I just finished up a movie myself, and I can't wait to do another one. Well, they are fun, but I'll never get away from stand-up because there's nothing like the live crowd. Eddie Murphy, he's coming back, but can you imagine releasing one comedy album every decade for 50 years? You know, I think George Carlin, he owns the record for most on most HBO comedy specials, and he made the money. He was an old man, and he was still putting them out because he loved comedy. He did it till the day he died. Not because he had to, he wanted to. If you do what you love to do, you never work a day in your life. That's what they say. So, along with his album a year for 50 years, Jonathan Winters won 11 Grammy Awards. 8 of those were for the best comedy album. And that was the thing, man. Back in the day, now with the internet's kind of ruined comedy albums, kind of ruined music too for that point. But I mean, if you get a Grammy Award for the best comedy album, you're at the top of your game. This guy's got 8 of them. He also won Best Album for Children and the Best Spoken Comedy Album. And I always thought it was cool. I always thought later on, you know, after I've done everything else, I also want to do a kids' TV show, because who don't want to be in there with Mr. Rogers and Big Bird and Sesame Street and the Muppets? And I'd love to do a children's show. So hopefully, if I live long enough later in my career, I'll do one. But even George Carlin, I know, when I did his podcast, little known fact about him, he was the voice of Thomas the Tank Engine. So here was a dirty comedian, but he still did the kids thing, and he still came out great, and I really respect that. Let's see, he had a career that spanned 6 decades, and he did hundreds of television shows. The Steve Allen Show, the Gary Moore Show, The Wacky World of Jonathan Winters, so he got his own TV show there. Probably what our generation remembers for Mork and Mindy, where he played Murph. He was on Hee Haw, and I remember my parents, that was must-see TV for my parents back in the day, Hee Haw, so you made it on there. That was brought you to him, you know, by your parents, and then we got to see him in Mork and Mindy. Then he was in It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, and that got some talk on the internet when I asked him about one of them, that some people loved him on that also. Here's one I didn't even know, and I'm into comedy, man, and this one blew my mind because I'd have never guessed it in a million years till I read it. He was the voice of Grandpa Smurf in the TV series and in the movies Smurfs and Smurfs 2. I had no idea that this guy was Papa Smurf. So that puts him on a whole new category for me personally. Not that he needs it, but, you know, hey. Let's see. He actually passed away 9 days after completing Smurfs 2 and they decided to dedicate the movie to him because such a legendary career. I mean, like I said, we saw my generation at the end of his time, you know, with Mork and Mindy and stuff. But before that, he had just accomplished so much in our parents' generation that they're just one of the legendary, iconic comedians of the time. He won an Emmy Award for the short-lived series Davis Rules. And let's see. He was also a painter, okay, in his spare time. Like, I mean, everybody's got a hobby, you know, outside of comedy. What do you do? He was also a painter. He did many art gallery shows where he'd, you know, put his work on display, his paintings. He authored several books, including one on the bestsellers list. So he was also an author. And you know, I found out John Cougar Mellencamp. I always known him as the great, you know, musical artist, but he's a big-time painter too, and I had no idea. I seen him on Sammy Hagar's podcast. So let's hope they're coming on over here to Funny Like a Clown podcast. His father was an alcoholic, and his parents separated when he was 7. And I think that's a common thing. I think, you know, most people who do comedy, they have a dark childhood, and I think they use comedy to kind of cope with it, you know, and it's a mechanism, you know. You laugh at your pain, okay? That's how you deal with it, by laughing at it. And certainly, you know, I went through a divorce and it was killing me, and I came up with the child support superhero, and that was a way of me coping with the pain that I was dealing with, going through, seeing my child being hurt, and knowing he was being hurt, and nothing I could do about it because the government's going to raise the kids nowadays, not you. So, you know, and even Robin Williams himself, you know, he had a dark past. You know, what was his famous line? That I always feared being alone, but that's not the fear. The fear is being with people who make you feel like you're alone. So being alone ain't half as bad as people who shitting on you, I guess, you know. Let's see. Because of his dark childhood, he was alone in his room where he interviewed himself a lot, and he created his own characters. And who can't relate to that? I mean, you know, when I was a kid, I was playing Star Wars. I had a stick outside for a lightsaber, and I'm fighting my imaginary friends. So, I mean, this guy actually got into where he was interviewing himself, and he had characters that he came up with in his head. He got teased at school a lot for his parents' divorce, which nowadays it's such a common thing, but back then, I mean, if you broke up back then, it was a very shameful thing. And nowadays, with child support and alimony, it makes more sense to break up and stay together. So they've changed that a lot. But and it even said, you know, he learned to deal with his pain through laughter. That's how he dealt with his hard childhood, was he'd make fun of it and learn to laugh at it. You got to laugh at your pain, I'll tell you. If you don't laugh at this world, it'll eat you up, chew you up, and spit you out, man. And in his adult life, you know, as a response to his sorrow, he quit high school in his senior year and joined the Marines. After the Marines, he studied cartooning at the Daytona Art Institute, and that was where he met his wife. At his start, he lost his watch, okay? And he couldn't afford another watch because him and his wife weren't doing too good. And his wife encouraged him to enter a writing contest. In the first place, prize, a new watch. So he decided to do that. He won that. He won the watch. Winning that led to a job as a DJ locally in town there where they were having the contest. After 2.5 years, the program director arranged an audition with CBS in New York City. So he must have been hitting it big with being a DJ there for the program director to arrange that. So he promised his wife that he was going to go to New York City, lived in Ohio, and he said if he didn't make it big within a year that he'd move back to Ohio. He moved there to New York with $56 in his pocket. That's what he did to start with. You got to respect that. You going in the middle of nowhere with no money, you're taking a chance right there, folks. But, you know, a lot of comics do that, man. You know, what's the old saying? You know, if you don't sleep in the back of your car and shower at a gym, you're not a real comic. I mean, if you're going to go for it, man, you got to go for it. And he got an agent, and he started stand-up comedy with the $56 once he got there. He got on TV's Chance of a Lifetime. That was his big break on CBS's Omnibus. He did commercials after that. I mean, you know, Chance of a Lifetime, that was kind of the American Got Talent of its time. You know, if you got on there, that'd expose you as, you know, somebody trying to break into the big time. And certainly TV can break into big time, that's for sure. He did commercials. His comedy albums he did. He had popular characters. Mud Fricket was one of them. I remember that one actually from Hee Haw when I was watching with my parents. And here comes a couple more Harleys in Winchendon, Massachusetts. They got the toys and Harleys. That's what they do. But let's see. He appeared on the Tonight Show. Okay, on CBS's show, competing with you know, Red Skelton and Carol Burnett, and those were the legends of the time, and this guy's competing with them too. And you know, the Tonight Show back then, it's a whole lot different than it is now. I mean, if you get on there now, not that it's a big thing, but it ain't gonna make you. If you get on the Tonight Show as a comedian back when Johnny Carson was there, instantly you're a working major draw comic. I mean, only the best of the best get on, where nowadays, you know, they get everybody and the brothers getting on. It's a common thing. So while it still is a good stepping stone, it's not the made man comic it was back in the day. So let's see. Some of his more memorable appearances were on the Dean Martin Show and the Celebrity Roasts. And I'll tell you, the Dean Martin Roast, they started it all. I mean, everybody watches the roast on Comedy Central today, but Dean Martin started it all. And if you go on YouTube, you can check out some of these roasts. And they had the stars of the time, and you could watch them today and laugh just as hard as you do at any of the ones you're watching now. It was just geniuses at work, and that's why, you know, the ones on Comedy Central are doing so good today, because they paved the way with what they did back then. And you know, if you got something good, everybody wants to copy it. You know that. He was on the Andy Williams Show, Hollywood Squares, which I don't remember him as that one. Hollywood Squares. That was only the top people at the time. Good Morning America, another one. You know, these are all the top people getting on these shows. He did some movies. The Russians Are Coming, Viva Max. He and Woody Allen were regulars on the kid TV show Hot Dog. I don't know if everybody remembers that one or not. Again, we're going back to kids TV shows, but I mean, here's, you know, movies, comedy albums, television. I mean, this guy worked his way up. He's at the top of his game, you know. He got on the Muppet Show, which, you know, if you think about that as a kid show nowadays, but back, you know, when I was a kid, Muppet Show was on. That was primetime television. You and your parents watched it together, and you enjoyed the puppets, and your parents, you know, they enjoyed the guest stars, and it was only the top people, like Kenny Rogers. I mean, it wasn't like a kid show of today. That was a primetime, you made it show to be on the Muppets back then, you know. Let's see, the new Scooby-Doo movies he was in. He was the narrator. Oh, and there goes Funny Look On Podcast. All right, I'm back. All right, it was he was the narrator for Frosty Returns, and who the hell didn't watch Frosty the Snowman and Frosty Returns as a kid? Those were the legendary, you stayed at home to watch them as a kid, you know, movies. And all right, we got that adjusted. All right, the wind's blowing me down here, folks. Let's see, he was in the Flintstones. Alec Baldwin's The Shadow, which I remember that, where he took on more of a serious role, where, you know, he was known for the comedy and stuff, but there he took on a serious role in The Shadow, and I thought he did a very good job with that. He was in Animaniacs, the PBS kids show encouraging kids to exercise. He had his own on PBS, which, I mean, you're in there with Big Bird and everybody encouraging kids to exercise. That's what we grew up on, folks. And we, you know, when we were kids, we didn't have the Nickelodeon, we didn't have the Cartoon Network. PBS was it, man. That was like the top of the kids. We couldn't wait Saturday morning cartoons, you know, but other than that, PBS was where it was at for kids. So if you wanted to reach them, that's where you went. He was only the second recipient ever of the Mark Twain Prize, which, I mean, they don't just give those out to anybody and their brother. You really got to do something special to get them, and he was only the second recipient ever. That shows you how storied of his career he had. Did The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle, and I believe that was the movie they put out about the cartoon years later. I didn't see it, but I do remember the trailers for the movie Rocky and Bullwinkle, and certainly was a hit movie at the time. Comedy Central rates him number 18 on their list of all-time comedians of all time. Let's see, he was a pioneer of improv. You know, that's a good point, the improv. I seen one time where they had him, he was on a show. I don't remember the show, but I was watching it. They put him in like an attic, like a made-up attic with like a bunch of stuff that, you know, would have been in somebody's attic. And, you know, he didn't practice. He didn't have any lines. He didn't know it was he just went around, picked up each piece and started doing like a short show with it, which each piece was in the attic. It was improv. Just, you had to think of something funny about right on the spot. And it was just genius to be able to do that. Whose line is it now? You know, that's kind of the improv of our day where, you know, they put some people together and they'd throw things at them and you had to make something off the top of your head about it. Let's see. He said that his inspirations were Robin Williams, Steve Martin, and Johnny Carson. So, I mean, what a thrill, you know, Robin Williams, you know, one of your inspirations, and you get to work with him on Mork and Mindy that many years later, you know. I mean, that was like a thrill for me. I flew up to Alaska, and one of my dreams in life was to open for Sam Kinnison's opening act, Carl LeBove, and I got to open for him up there, and it's like, when you get to work with the person who inspired you, it's just such a special moment in your life, and I think that's always something you should remember in comedy, you know. That you got to set goals for yourself, you know. They say if you write something down on a piece of paper, you're 3 times as more likely to do it in life than if you just, you know, think about it in the back of your head and then forget about it. If you write it down, so I wrote out my bucket list, what I wanted to accomplish before I died, on a piece of paper, and I've crossed out about 90% of it. So, I mean, because it was on that paper, I've gotten most of it done, and that's why you get ahead in life, because, you know, you got to have goals, and you can't just sit home waiting for the phone ring to make them happen. You got to go out and make them happen yourself. Let's see. Some of his famous sayings, Jonathan Winters. This was how he inspired other people and his ideas to get ahead. He said, "If your ship doesn't come in, then swim to meet it." Okay, so, you know, just what I said. You know, I mean, Michael Jordan said, how many shots did he miss? That's why he won, because he missed so many shots. He knew how to make it, you know. I mean, I've gotten my ass kicked so many times in comedy I can't even count, but, you know, I never let it get me down. I kept getting back up and going toward my goal. And a lot of people, you know, they get their ass kicked and they say, this ain't for me, and quit. Well, you're never going to reach your goal if you quit, okay? You get your ass kicked, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, keep going toward your goal, and that's how you become a winner, not a loser right there. One of his other sayings was, I couldn't wait for success, so I went ahead without it. So, you know, and that's a good point. You know, I said earlier, if you're doing what you love to do, you never work a day in your life. And I'll give you an example. I just recently put out a small budget movie, From Preacher to Prophet, a Sam Kinison story about my hero, Sam Kinison, and one of the, you know, his brother, Bill Kinison, you know, he seen that I was putting it out, and he made me promise that he got to see it first before anybody else, and he was expecting, you know, all I was trying to put out was a small budget film with me and my friends for YouTube and the internet. He was expecting a big budget, you know, film, you know, box office thing that I was going to open with a major budget, and that wasn't what it was, and he said it was kind of amateurish, and I'm like, well, yeah, that's all I was really going for, you know, because I ain't got $1 million to put out a big budget film, but you know, I put it on the internet, and so far the reviews are great, but, you know, that could have really got anybody else down, where Bill Kinison, you know, he's my hero's brother, and he really didn't get behind what I was doing, but, you know, I don't think it was that he didn't, you know, hated it. It was more he misunderstood what I was trying to do and thought it was a bigger thing. But if you get a chance, go check it out on YouTube, and I think I'm very proud of how it came out, and hopefully that'll inspire somebody to make the actual movie about him, and who knows, maybe they'll make a movie about Jonathan Winters someday. And I know they did about, they made a movie about Robin Williams. I watched it, it was so long ago I don't remember half of it, and I don't remember, but I think Jonathan Winters' character might have been in there, and deservedly so, because here's a guy, you know, 50 years of putting out a comedy album, did what he loved to do until the day he died, you know, he's still doing the Smurfs and everything, you know, and, you know, if you can do what you love to do for 60 years, and, you know, I got started in comedy late in my, you know, later in my life, and while I'm so glad I did it, I've just had some of the most fun times of my life. I think, what if I had started earlier, you know, what would I have accomplished then? You'll never know. So, you know, do what you love to do, don't ever give up, you know, keep doing it. And I've had so many people try to kick me down. It's such a dirty business, comedy, you know. People get jealous of what you do, and, you know, they'll try to kick you down and shit all over you. And, you know, don't ever listen to the haters, you know. I actually had somebody say, hey, you're getting some really good numbers on your podcast. How do you do that? And I said, you know, love what you do and don't ever listen to the haters. That's the most important thing. Is had I listened to the haters, I wouldn't even be doing the podcast. And I had about 5 people really shitting on me about it, and I'm getting 300 hits a week. So I'll take the 300 hits a week over the 5 people, you know, who are negative in life. Because, you know what? Funny Like a Clown podcast, it's one funny-ass podcast, and I'm proud of it. And I want to thank you guys listening, and I hope you tune in again next week. We'll be reviewing another comedian, and maybe we'll get some guests on, and I've come from you, Gardner, now Winchendon, and maybe we'll hit Fitchburg next. So, until next time, keep laughing and do what you love to do, folks. Good night.